Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be reviewing The Great Composers with Samuel Andreev on the Peterson Academy. So this is now the second course that I've taken with Samuel Andreev on the Academy, and he's quickly becoming one of my favorite professors. I absolutely love the way he talks about music. He's very inspirational, and he's a great music mind to learn about the technicalities of music from. So this course is a little bit different from his first course, which I reviewed a couple months ago. The history of Western music. That course kind of covered the inception of Western music all the way up to the present day. And like I said, it kind of filled in some of the gaps there and gave you some vocabulary to understand the more technical aspects of classical music a little bit better. This course doesn't have as much of that. This course is mainly centered on the lives and biographical details of 9 of the greatest composers of all time. It's spread across 8 lectures, so one of the lectures covers 2 at once, which we'll talk about in a second here. And I just thought it was a fantastic course for kind of filling in some of the gaps on what you may or may not know about these great composers, because a lot of them lived very interesting lives. Some of them lived very boring lives, which you'll see if you take this course, but absolutely fantastic course. It really inspired me to go back and to listen to some more classical music. So I hope it does the same for you. And if you can't take this course, I hope this video does that for you at least. So as always, I'll go through the synopsis on the Peterson Academy website first, and then we will talk about the quizzes, the lectures, and the recommended books. In The Great Composers, an 8-hour course, Samuel Andreev embarks on a captivating journey through the lives and works of renowned classical composers from Bach to Stravinsky. We explore their unique compositional styles, innovative techniques, personal circumstances, and the cultural context that shaped their music. The lectures highlight the composers' significant contributions to the evolution of classical music, their influence on subsequent generations, and the enduring relevance of their works in the modern era. Throughout the course, we gain a deeper appreciation for the power of classical music to evoke emotion, challenge conventions, and reflect the human experience. So hopefully that gives you guys a general overview of what this course is about and what it covers. Overall, it's not as technical as the first course which he taught that gets more into the nitty-gritty of explaining the vocabulary of classical music and its history. And it's a long history to cover. You know, classical music, it's a big genre term. There's a lot of subgenres in that, right? There's Baroque music and Romantic music. There's a bunch of different subgenres within classical music, and he kind of details all that out in the first course that he taught. In this course, we spend each lecture on a different composer, going over basically their entire life, from when they were a child all the way up until they started composing music, and what effect their music had on the larger canon, how it influenced composers who came after them. So each lecture, like I just said, is titled after a composer. So the first lecture, we start with Johann Sebastian Bach. You got to start with Bach, right? You could start with somebody else, right? He's not the first composer that we have music recorded from or that you can play music of, but he's kind of the composer. I think most people who are educated when it comes to classical music or classically trained musicians, most of them agree that Bach is kind of the GOAT. He's the one that we put on the pedestal above everyone else. Even Samuel Andreev says that if he has to be objective, he would probably put Bach above everybody else, because it's a ludicrous statement to say that Bach invented music, but it's not as crazy as it might sound. He invented a lot of different things, and his contributions to music are unlike anybody else who came before or after him. So learning more about his life was very fascinating. He's not somebody who traveled a lot. He kind of stayed in the same little area throughout his entire life. Didn't have the most exciting life, but hey, he fathered like 20 children, so I'm sure that was very exciting. But yeah, it was very interesting to learn more about Bach. He's somebody who I haven't read a ton about. I've watched a couple documentaries about him, but I'm definitely going to be searching for a book that completely covers Bach's life sometime in the near future here. Now, in the second lecture, we covered Joseph Haydn, or Haydn, however you want to pronounce it. He is a composer who I didn't listen to the most coming into this course. So after watching this lecture, I was very, very much inspired to go back and re-listen to his work. Now that I can connect with them a little bit deeper, and I have a deeper appreciation for his music. The way he kind of laid out exactly how he was technically brilliant and what he did over other composers was very interesting. And like I said, it just helped me get a deeper appreciation for his music, which was awesome. So the third lecture was Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Of course, you can't have a greatest composers course without including Mozart. He's absolutely fundamental, and learning more about his life was fantastic. This was probably the lecture that I learned the least from, just because I've already read a couple books on Mozart. The John Swafford book in particular is one of my favorite, and that book wasn't recommended in the recommended books for this course. So any book by John Swafford, I think he has one on Beethoven as well, and maybe one or two other classical composers. He does excellent work in creating biographies for these magnificent composers. So highly recommend that book. In the fourth lecture, we have Ludwig van Beethoven. Absolutely brilliant. He's one of my favorite composers of all time. Like many of you watching here, he was one of the key composers who got me into listening to classical music. So I have done quite a bit of research on Beethoven in my own time. So going into this lecture, I wasn't expecting to learn too much. There were a couple unique details thrown in there that I didn't know about, but for the most part, I was already pretty studied on Beethoven. I absolutely love his music. So unfortunately, my two favorite composers of all time, that changes all the time, so take that with a grain of salt. But my two favorite composers actually weren't mentioned at all in this course. So Samuel Andreev said in the first lecture that the composers that he selected for this course are just kind of the ones that he likes the most. They kind of reflect, they're a good selection because they reflect different eras of classical music, and they kind of bridge together nicely, but he said that this was completely subjective. He just picked the ones that he wanted to talk about the most. So if you guys can guess who those two composers are, who I absolutely love but weren't mentioned in this course, if you guys can guess down below in the comments, that'd be cool. I'll let you know if you get it right, but they're not anybody too obscure. They're not like incredibly obscure composers. They're pretty popular, so I'm sure you guys can guess them. But in the fifth lecture, we had Franz Schubert, again, a fantastic composer. I also didn't know a ton about his life going into this one, so this was a lecture that I definitely learned a lot from and gave me a much more deeper appreciation for his music. So I loved that lecture. In the sixth lecture, we had the duo lecture between Frédéric Chopin and Franz Liszt. And of course, those two should be paired together in a lecture. They were rivals and friends, kind of both throughout their career. Both probably the two greatest pianists of all time. Maybe second to Rachmaninoff. It depends on what you value, but I love Liszt and Chopin, two of the greatest romantic composers of all time. And yeah, it was awesome to learn about those two rock stars. In seven, we had Arnold Schoenberg, who going into this series this was the lecture that I was looking at, and I was kind of eyeing it up because this was the composer that I knew the least amount about going into it. And Schoenberg is definitely a unique composer. He's a brilliant mind, very unique. And yeah, I learned a lot from that lecture, and I have a much, much greater appreciation for his music. So if there's one composer that I would say go check him out, it's probably Schoenberg, because he's probably the least known name out of the list of composers that was covered in this course. And his music it's extreme. It's intense. And yeah, I absolutely loved that lecture. The last lecture in number 8, we had, of course, Igor Stravinsky, who is one of my favorite composers of all time. I absolutely love Russian composers, and he composed one of my favorite ballets of all time, The Rite of Spring. So cool to learn more about Stravinsky. Very unique character, and he had quite an interesting life. So that was an interesting lecture. And then in the closing remarks of that 8th lecture, Samuel Andreev did a fantastic job at inspiring the audience to listen to classical music. I thought he did a great job at that. So one of the questions that the students asked him was, do you need fancy headphones? Should I go out and buy a record player? Like, should I play this stuff on vinyl? Is it better on CD or vinyl? Like, how should I listen to this music? And I really liked Andreev's answer to this. Basically what he said was, you can listen to classical music on an iPhone speaker and have like a transcendental experience. Like, you don't need anything special. It's not about the quality of the audio so much as it is about the quality of the music. And I think that rings true. Now, I myself have spent thousands of dollars on record players and records and headphones, and I'm somebody who's a little bit more of an audiophile. I like things to sound really clean. Now, I don't have like Klipsch speakers or the most expensive speakers in the world or anything like that, but I do like things to sound good, so I do put an effort into that, but it's absolutely not necessary. And another thing that he mentioned was finding this music's pretty easy. You don't actually need to sign up for a Spotify account or an Apple Music account. Most of this music is on YouTube for free. You can find it for free on the internet. So that's another good thing about classical music, is that it's so old. It's not copyrighted anymore, so you can just go listen to it. But another thing that I would say is, with this course, there wasn't We'll talk about the recommended books here in a second because they are good books. I haven't read any of them, so I can't say that for certain. But knowing Samuel Andreev, I'm sure he picks 3 amazing books. But getting into the books in a second here, there wasn't any resource mentioned in this course for really listening to music or finding the works of these great composers. So what I've done, this took me a few months to do. So if you guys find any use of this, that would make me feel amazing. But what I did a few months ago was I took a couple months and I just composed playlists for each of the greatest composers of all time. So I tried to collect their complete works. It's very difficult to do and to know if you have everything. But what I tried to do was collect the complete works of 95 to 100 of the greatest composers of all time. I can't remember if I was at 95 or 100, but basically 100. We can round up. And all of those playlists are on my Spotify, which should be linked in the description of this video. If not, go to my Instagram, find the link tree, and my Spotify should be linked there. But if you want access to playlists that have like curated the complete works of the 100 greatest composers of all time, I think that could be a valuable resource for you guys if you have Spotify. So if anybody finds any use with that, then that would make me feel amazing. It took me a long time to make those playlists, but I'm glad I have them. I kind of have them for the rest of my life now, and I have just beautiful playlists of like I said, the greatest composers of all time. So that could be one resource for you guys. Also, the recommended books, we'll get to that now. So the first one is Mozart by Maynard Sullivan. The second is The Romantic Generation by Charles Rosen. And the third one is Igor Stravinsky, Poetics of Music by George Seferis. So yeah, unfortunately, I haven't read any of those 3 books yet. They are definitely going on the reading list. I don't know where, because that list just keeps expanding every day. But maybe if I can find these ones at the library or something, I'll go and pick them up and read them, because I'm sure Samuel Andreev has recommended some good books there. I myself have only read a few books on Mozart and Beethoven in particular. I mentioned the John Swafford books earlier. I have a really nice Times magazine. I think it's Times magazine. I don't know who produced this book, but I have this huge book of Beethoven that kind of goes over his whole life. It's beautifully done, massive book with color images, and it's gorgeous. I found it at a thrift store for $2. So go thrift shopping. You never know what you'll find there. I actually found some really, really good quality vinyl records for classical composers at thrift stores too. I found the Great Men of Music, the Times Great Men of Music. They used to put these sets out way back in the day. I think this was 20, 30 years ago. They don't produce them anymore, but these Great Men of Music box sets that Time magazine would put out, I have 2 of them from Bach and Tchaikovsky. So I love collecting classical music on vinyl. For me, I can tell a little bit of a difference when I listen to music on vinyl. It feels a little bit more full, it fills the room a bit more. There seems to be more distance between the instruments and the sounds. I don't know if that makes any sense, but for me, I can tell a difference when I listen to vinyl. So, I recommend anybody collecting vinyl. I started probably 4 or 5 years ago. I have, I don't know, somewhere in the range of 500 vinyl records now. So I've just been collecting them over time. And you might think damn, vinyl's expensive to collect, man. How did you get that many? And I do have a lot of new age vinyl, some modern hip hop and stuff. But for the most part, I've just been going to thrift stores or old farmers markets and stuff like that. And you can find records there for very cheap, $1 or $2 a record. So if you want to go that route, I think that's a good way to go. If you want recommendations for which record players to buy, if you're starting out, or if you want to blow a bunch of money right away, let me know down in the comments. I've done a little bit of research on record players, so I know a couple things. Don't get a Crawley Cruiser. Just don't make that mistake. But yeah, if you guys have any questions about this course, definitely let me know down below in the comments. And the quizzes, I forgot about the quizzes. They're pretty easy, man. If you're paying attention, they're not going to be too difficult. There was nothing in this course that was insanely complicated that you had to remember. Out of all the courses that I've taken so far, this was one of the easier ones when it came to the quizzes. So you shouldn't have a problem there. But yeah, if you guys have any questions of where to go with listening to any of these composers too, I know for myself, when I first started listening to classical music, it was just kind of Beethoven's 5th and then Beethoven's 9th and then back to Beethoven's 5th and then back to his 9th. So I was a little bit stuck in a repetitive cycle there, but eventually I found out, hey, Beethoven has a lot of great music. It's not just those two symphonies. He has a ton of fantastic music out there. So if you guys want to dive deeper into your favorite composers, or if you guys want to learn about new composers, or maybe you really like Tchaikovsky, you want somebody like Tchaikovsky, just let me know down below in the comments and I can help you guys out, or other people watching this video can help you out. So yeah, that's all that I have for today, guys. If you guys like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, share with your friends to help boost this channel in the algorithm. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, it means the world to me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.